the LaunchFamily Podcast, where we make sense of modern parenting one real conversation at a time. I'm your host, Jessica Shelley, mom of six and a former public school teacher, and your guide to navigating today's chaotic parenting landscape with clarity and heart. In every episode, we bring you insights from parents, educators, and experts to help you feel more confident, connected, and supported as you raise your family in a modern world full of competing advice and information overload. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Tara Clark. Tara is the founder of Modern Mom Props, a wildly popular platform offering both humor and heartfelt conversations around the realities of motherhood. Starting as a space for relatable laughs, Tara's work evolved into a true movement, addressing everything from mental health struggles to social media comparison to the overwhelming pressure that moms face today. Tara, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Jessica. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, I'm so excited for this conversation because, as moms, we go through so much. There's so much information out there. There's this information overload, as we kind of mentioned already. And we're going to dive into that a little bit and maybe talk through some strategies on how we can maybe cut through some of that information overload. So can you
Yes.
tell us a little bit more about the story behind Modern Mom Props and how it evolved into what it is today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I should probably backtrack all the way to before my son was born. I used to work at Nickelodeon and I loved working at Nickelodeon. I actually worked in digital marketing and social media. There was a time where I was Dora the Explorer on Facebook, and my mom used to run around and tell people, like, my daughter's Dora the Explorer. I was like, on Facebook, mommy, on Facebook. And when my son was born in 2012, I was faced with the decision of, do I want to continue working at a company that I loved, or do I want to stay home with him full time? And it was a really hard decision for me because on one hand, I loved the company and I loved the people I worked with. And on the other hand, I so desperately wanted to be home with him, and we tried so hard to have him. And then finally we did. And so I ended up staying home with him. And when he was about 3 years old, I was looking for a few things. One was a creative outlet to, play around with again. And there happened to be a shiny new website called Canva that was up and coming. And Instagram was like really starting to take off at that point. And this was, just to give you an idea of timing, this was February of 2016. I said to my friends and family, I'm going to start an Instagram account and I'm going to monetize it. And they're like, you're going to do what? And I'm like, no, it's going to be a thing. It's going to be a thing. Like, follow, like, watch me. And so that's what I did. And I also, at the same time, I was looking for community. I was living in New York City at the time, and it was very lonely. And I had a hard time meeting people and making friends and connecting with other moms. And so created my own village. I literally, started my Instagram account and met friends all over the country, all over the world. And we just started chatting about different things. And then when I left New York City at the end of 2016, but in the beginning of 2017, I changed the name to Modern Mom Probs. And then the account just took off from there because everyone's like, oh, I have modern mom problems. And so regardless of where they were living, they resonated with it. And so the account grew from there. And when I first started the account, it was much more focused on humor. But as the account evolved and as I evolved as a mom and as a person, I like to say that it covers anything that falls underneath a modern mom problem is something that I am going to talk about. So whether it's something silly like doing a Target run or something serious like maternal mental health or postpartum depression, I'm going to talk about it. And so that's why I'm so grateful to have the platform that I have today, to be able to connect with other moms like you and to be able to like share my story and share their stories. And so that's really how it got started. And then also in 2021, I wrote a book. In 2022, I launched a podcast. And so just like a lot of things have happened over the course of the run so far.
Yeah. And you talk a little bit more about your journey too. And kind of, I assume, your child is growing, you're encountering more problems that maybe you hadn't realized in the toddler or infant stage. What inspired the evolution from shifting from only kind of humor-based posts to kind of getting into like the nitty-gritty of like the problems that we face in motherhood?
Yeah, it sort of happened very organically in that sense. Is I started it as a humor page and like we were laughing about how hard it was to have toddlers because my son was 3 at the time when I started the account. And when you have toddlers, like there's just so much content, not of them necessarily, but stories and jokes and things that you're going through and all of that kind of stuff. And so there was just like a wealth of just content that was just like flowing out of our house like that. And then as he grew, it shifted, because you don't have the same problems when you have a 3-year-old as you do, let's say, when you have a 7-year-old or an 8-year-old. And I think the world changed and the zeitgeist of social media changed, because when I got started, it was much more text based. And then TikTok exploded in 2020 and 2021. And so then it was like much more video focused. So the landscape changed. And I think that the account has always tried to keep up with the changing landscape, in addition to the messaging of talking about serious things and real things. I'll talk about all of it. I'll talk about silly things, and then I'll talk about mental health and the mental load of motherhood, all of the things that tend to fall on the shoulders of modern moms.
Yeah. And reflecting back on the previous generations, right? Social media was not a thing when we were being raised. And so it was like you go to the library and get a book, or maybe you get a book as a gift, or you go to the bookstore and you get a book. That's how we parent, is from what's, written on the pages in there. And now with this kind of rise of social media and digitalization and technology, there's so much information that you can find, whether that be stories, informative research, best practices, experts, coaches. I mean, you name it, it's out there, it feels like. So in your experience, why has this information overload become such a dominant challenge for today's moms?
It really is. I would definitely put that in my top 10 list of modern mom problems. When our parents were younger, who did they often go to? They probably went to their mother, maybe their sister, their aunt, like people that they knew, people that they trusted, obviously, like their pediatrician, midwife, that sort of thing. And maybe there was a handful of parenting books. Dr. Spock comes to mind. He was like the one that like people would always go to for childhood advice. And now every time you turn around and every time you pick up your phone, you're being bombarded with sleep training and feeding courses. And it's not just like the content, but it's also like courses and books and newsletters and just everything. And it's challenging for parents to wade through all of that content. And what I've learned now that I've been a parent for 12 years is that you have to wade through it the best that you can, try not to be swayed, and do what's best for your particular family. Because what works for my son may not work for your children, and vice versa. I was chatting with a parenting expert who has books, and she's a big fan of scripts. And it was one of the only times on my podcast that I ever like was really disagreeing with someone, because what I was saying was that scripts, in my personal experience, don't work well with my son. They just haven't. So for me, I need to be able to sort of tap into my own awareness of what I think would work with him and not use a verbatim script. And that's just my experience. And she did not like to hear that. She was like, no, they work for everybody. And I'm like, they don't work for everybody. And so that's just one example of something that modern moms or modern parents are faced with, is like, oh yeah, we'll try this and this has to work. It works for everybody. And there's no such thing as this works for everybody. It depends on your temperament as a parent. It depends on their temperament as children. Everyone has their own temperament and their personality. And that goes for so many of the other things, not just scripts, but whether it's like sleeping and eating and walking. Everyone's on their own journey, essentially, in their own timeline. So it's hard to wade through all of that and pick and choose. But that would be my biggest advice: is read as much as you can, learn as much as you can, and then take those good nuggets that work for you and your family.
Yeah. And then I think too, like the next step piece of that is, if you are talking to friends, if you are doing a Google search, also know that those things may not work for you. If it worked for someone else and you try it and it doesn't work, it doesn't mean that you failed as a mom, right? Like
No,
this
not at all.
cycle too. So let's talk a little bit about that. What comes next? If something doesn't work that I think will, what is that kind of mental cycle, or what resources could I maybe pull from then?
Yeah. One, know that you're still a good mom, even though, and I'm just using an example here of even though baby led weaning didn't work for you and your child, doesn't mean that you're a bad mom, doesn't mean that you're a failure, right? It just means that that particular instant for whatever was happening, it just didn't work out, whether it was temperament or timing or whatever. Um, and then you move on and then you say, okay, let's try something else. What can we try here that would make sense and work for us? And so we tried so many things. I'll give you an example for something that I did when my son was a newborn. When he was first born, I wanted to breastfeed, but it was really, really hard. And so I wasn't sure if he was getting enough milk. So I was pumping into the bottle and then giving him the bottle so that I could see the quantity that he was getting. Let's say he was getting 4 or 5 ounces, right? That made me feel better from an anxiety standpoint that I was like, well, I know that he's getting this. Okay. I could sleep well at night. He could sleep well at night. Actually, at that point, nobody was sleeping. So I shouldn't even use that as an example. Nobody was sleeping at night. Um, but at least I knew how much he was getting. So then I was nursing him and I was pumping. And then we went on vacation to Florida. And at that point, I introduced formula, and so then he was also drinking formula. So sometimes when I tell people, the story of, and I sort of cut it down for time here, but when I tell the story about our like breastfeeding and formula, I said I did all of it. And he was an extended feeder. He nursed until he was 2.5 years old. So I went from like barely being able to nurse in the beginning to him nursing until he was 2.5. And we had formula and we pumped and we did like everything that you can think to do, we did, because I wasn't just going to do the one thing. Like, how you said about like try one thing and then if that doesn't work, then move on. Like, well, that's what it was. It was like I was nursing and it wasn't great. And so I pumped and like that was okay. But then also I wanted to introduce formula and that was fine. So we were doing everything and all of it. And that's what worked for my family. It may not work for you, it may not work for others, but you just got to give it a try and see what sticks.
Yeah, I love that too perspective because I have 6 children. And so I'm thinking, even among reflecting on each of their journeys, right? Like none of that has been consistent and they have the same mom. So, um, you know,
Yeah.
like adjusting, we're in like peak school age right now. So I have a kindergartner,
Mhm.
second and third grade. And so I think that that's really clearly where I'm like, okay, I come from an education background too. I'm a teacher, but I'm still like, okay, this works with my oldest, but it's not working with my middle, and my kindergartner is not quite ready for this. So it's also like the timing, I think, that comes into that conversation. Like it could work, but just in a different time. Like as you mentioned too with breastfeeding and formula, like that was something you tried over time. It doesn't have to be fixed overnight. You're going to iterate, you're going to work on that with your child. And I think oftentimes when we get into that scroll, and I know we're going to get into this here in a minute, but social media makes it look a certain way that you can just like snap your fingers and it's beautiful, it's put together and it's clean, but there's time and it's messy behind the scenes. So, all right.
Yeah, all of that, Jess, all of that. It is messy and it is dirty and it takes time and all of that. And the stress that I had in the beginning when I thought my son wasn't eating, I didn't know, I couldn't tell, like that is so stressful. I wouldn't wish that upon anybody, and I know it happens to a lot of people. So, I'm glad that we're able to have these conversations to talk about that, because at that time I felt so alone. I felt like such a failure. I was like, I am such a bad mom and I just got this job. And so, how is this going to all work out?
Yeah, yeah. I think too, like we even connect on that. My second son, he was actually um diagnosed as failure to thrive at 4 months old. And I had really pushed breastfeeding because I wasn't able, like culturally, I was in a spot that wasn't really supportive of breastfeeding with my first. And my two oldest are 12 months apart. So I was still a new mom. Plus I was pregnant with another, and then I had another newborn, and he's failure to thrive. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's because I'm breastfeeding and I can't do it. Like all of the shame and the guilt and like, okay, I caused this for my son. He ended up having to go on a feeding tube for a short time and he's thriving now at 7, 8 years old. So, but it is like so isolating. You feel like you're the only one because not enough people talk about it, to your point. Like we experience it. Maybe we'll join a Facebook group, right? And we'll hear from other moms and we get a little bit of validation there. But then you also try that and you're like, well, that didn't work for me. Like there's still something wrong with me. There's still something wrong with the way that I'm doing it with my kid. And like this never ending cycle and loop. So
Yeah, that's
we
what
feel
it is.
pretty
So we
validated.
have to give,
Yeah,
yes, exactly. We have to give ourselves grace, and we have to give others grace too. And know that, none of this is perfect. There is no such thing as a perfect parent. There's no such thing as a perfect person. So we have to give ourselves grace in this journey as we're trying to all figure it out together.
absolutely. And I love that you say together because it is a community, whether that be online within your like local area. This idea of like scrolling for support, right? Like we're looking for that validation. How can that maybe sometimes backfire for moms?
It Unfortunately, it backfires too often. Like you said, like many times, picture this, right? Moms are sitting on their couches, maybe nursing their babies, right? And they're scrolling and they're trying to get validation on whether it's feeding or sleeping or whatever it happens to be. And they'll post something and it just gets absolutely torn apart. And there's so much shaming and so much guilt that happens online for people sharing their stories, and they're just trying to look for validation. They're just trying to say someone that they just want to hear, like, I see you. I see the struggle that you're having right now. I know what you're going through. And it's heartbreaking because many times the people who need the most care and compassion get it the least. Not always, but many times that's the case. And it's so easy for trolls to leave these horrible, horrible messages for people, on the other end of their keyboard or their other end of their phone without any regard that these are people that they're commenting this to, like real individuals with feelings. And it's just disgusting, but it happens a lot. And it's not always men, it's women, it's moms, it's other moms saying, you're doing it differently from me, and I don't like that. What I've noticed, sort of anecdotally, is that it tends to be, not always, and I shouldn't say this 100% of the time, I'm just using my own personal story here. I see many times that it happens to be older moms, like in their 60s, like a different generation, commenting really negative things on younger moms that might be like 35. And that's not cool. That's not the vibe. When people are like, that's not the vibe, sis. That's not the vibe. Um, I don't see that quite as often with the younger generations of, I'm saying like women in like their 30s and 35s and early 40s. I do see that with people in their 70s. And again, this isn't 100% of the time. It's just something that I've noticed anecdotally. And like, that's not cool. That's not cool. Like, yes, we may parent differently, but also the world is very different
Yes.
from when you parented your kids, you know, 40 years ago.
Yes. And even perspectives and new research that's come out. Like I was talking
So
with
much.
another like expert like last week and we were talking about how even when you call up your mom, right? Like if you're in your 30s, they raised children through a different generation. They grew up in a different generation. And by default, in those moments of like weakness and anxiety, depression, stress, overwhelm, we default to how we were parented because we don't necessarily have the skills unless we've looked for additional or alternate information. And so I think, to this point too of, the information overload is like, I didn't even know that I should have been doing this or that I could have been doing this. How do you see that contributing to like anxiety or depression in moms too? When it comes to just source of information or sheer volume of information?
Yeah. I think all of it plays into it. Is if we want to tackle the volume of it first, let's tackle that. When we
Yeah.
pick up our phones, and we pick up our phones like 100 times a day, right? So almost every time you're picking up your phone, you're being bombarded with whether it's marketing messages or news or other information. And our primitive brains can hardly even handle the amount of messages and media and content that we're receiving on the course of a day every day, right? Times that by 365 days a year. So that's one thing. And then with the messages, with the shaming, with the guilt, all of those other things, with the feeling like invalidated, that leads to the anxiety and depression. And it's not just young moms, it's men, it's women. I mean, it's literally people right across the board in our society. If you have access to a smartphone or the 24-hour news cycle, whatever it is, like it's just too much information. It's going to lead to anxiety. There's no two ways about that. On my podcast, I ask my not my listeners, I ask my guests, and the last question I always ask them is, what do you think is the biggest modern mom problem today? 9 times out of 10, they say social media comparison. And these are all different types of people. These are authors, these are medical professionals, these are mom influencers, writers, all different kinds of people. And they all say the same thing. Every once in a while, it will be something different, but sort of related. It might be like mental load of motherhood or something like that. But social media comparison, time and time again, is the answer that I keep hearing. And I believe it. I see that. Whether it's from other creators who have a cleaner, whiter, bigger kitchen than you, whose children sit better at the dinner table, whose kids are in matching outfits, whose kids look nicer when they're going to church on Sunday, whatever it is, we can't help but then soak in those messages and then question our own decisions. And so I like to always say to people, when you start to feel that feeling, that sort of like icky feeling in your chest, put down your phone, go do something analog, go play with your children, go outside for a walk, go read a magazine, just do something different. Go read a book, maybe not magazines. Sometimes magazines are the same way with Instagram. Go read a book, do something analog to just sort of like clear your head. I like to often go to my window and just like look out really far, whether it's like at trees or clouds or something that you're not like looking so close like you do on your phone. And one, that helps my posture because I have like the worst posture. I'm like a banana. Or it also just like helps your eyesight to be able to like look in it, and it clears your mind. It clears your brain too.
I love that strategy of just like looking at something far away. Like maybe just that simple like mindset shift of, okay, it's not right here. It's not in my face. I can take a step away and I can see the bigger picture, which is literally out my window. The world.
Literally that, Jess. Literally that.
I love it. I'm going to take that one with me for sure. In this kind of world of endless opinions and opinions, we talked about social, we talked about, generational differences and things like that. How can moms maybe make one decision and then feel good about, okay, I've made a decision, I can take action versus maybe being in this like analysis paralysis sort of state?
Yeah, baby steps. Everyone has to start somewhere, right? If you're starting a new fitness routine, you need to start somewhere, right? You go from my one friend, she just started running marathons and she did this app called Couch to 5K. And so it's just like every day, it's like a little bit of running, little bit of running, little bit of running. And then next thing you know, she could do a 5K and then she could do a 10K and now she could do a half marathon. And it literally started from zero. And so that's true whether it's working out or it's true whether you're in parenting. If you say to yourself, I want to feed my children less processed foods and I want to, give them less red dye 40. And I'm just using this as an example. There's nothing wrong with processed foods. I'm just using that as one example. But your decisions when you go to the supermarket then dictate that, right? So you say like, okay, I'm at the supermarket. Instead of buying this whole big thing of cheese doodles, what could I get instead, right? I'm going to get carrots instead. And it's just like one little thing each time. And then those smaller habits end up leading to really big habits. And then that ends up leading to a different sort of lifestyle. And that's true with parenting. And whether it's, like I said, eating healthier food and less cheese doodles and more carrots, or getting on the treadmill or going for a walk, or when you're with your children, having more patience with them. And I have so much more patience with my son now than I did when he was younger because it takes time to work into that. That sort of stuff doesn't happen overnight, or at least it didn't with me and my husband. And so the more you practice patience, the more you practice speaking to everyone with respect and modeling good behavior for them, and then they model good behavior back. All of that stuff is baby steps. All of that has to start somewhere, and it might as well be today, right?
I love that too. And I'm reflecting, oh my gosh, introspective mom generations that we have right now. But I'm reflecting too, the behavior that we see in our kids is often what they've seen us do, right? And so when I'm like, hey, son, we need to get up, we need to go do this, it's like, okay, well, he's playing his computer game or he's doing a, project on the computer. I work on the computer. He's seeing what I do. So I need to also get up and go participate and do that with him. Even if it only takes 5 minutes of time. Like we need to just kind of understand like rhythmically, routine wise, how that also influences our kids too. So I think another
1,000% yes. 1,000% yeah. No, it's true because I think that about my phone and my working on the computer too, that my husband like wants to sort of like default into that kind of stuff. But it takes effort. The one thing about our generation of parents is how intentional we are. We are such intentional parents on how we speak with our children, how we model good behavior, how we respect them, and that's probably my favorite thing that I could take away for all the like, and I'm using this in quotes, bad things that would be going on with modern parenting. The one of the really great things is how intentional we are and how hard we're trying, and how much we want to respect our children and have them respect us, and just be a more wholesome unit. And I love that about this generation.
Amen. I'm right there with you. I'm excited for what the future can hold because we do have more resources and we do have more information, but also which opens doors, right? But then also this kind of reflective sort of practitioner mindset of, okay, well, what am I doing right now that I could change to then influence my child? Um, and I think another big thing, especially when it comes to education, is, the parent is often left out. Like they feel like, oh, I'm just like, on the outside of my child's life. But really, you're the driver of that. You're their main support person until, they're an adult. And so, what is your perspective, I guess, on trusting your intuition as a parent, in this age of information overload?
It is huge. When my son was a little bit younger, he had some behaviors that I was like, something doesn't seem right here. And I kept saying to my husband, and he's like, no, 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 you don't know, like, you're just making that up. And I'm like, no, like, I feel like there's something that we're missing. And so we had taken him to a doctor, and there was some thing that we were missing. And when we realized that, we're like, oh, well, now he needs the therapies to work on that. And it made a huge difference. And then it helped us give him more grace. Then he was easier with himself. It just like made so many things easier because we were working towards, I don't want to say fixing something, but for lack of a better term, we were working towards like a solution on solving some of the behavior issues that we were having, and we didn't know the root cause. And then we found out what the root cause was. And so I didn't give up on that. And it may have taken me years to finally, whether it was like convince my husband or talk through it or whatever it was, to get like the necessary therapies. I didn't take no for an answer on that one. I just was like, I'm his mom. I know him better than anybody in the entire world. Something just doesn't seem totally right. And I was right. I was right on that. And so I think that parents should 100%, if they feel like something isn't right, keep talking to the doctors, keep talking to the experts, keep advocating for your child. There's nothing more important that parents can do than advocate for their children. And we did, and it worked out, and we continue to advocate for our son.
That too, because it's usually like it starts in that micro moment, right? Of I notice something is different or maybe not ideal, right? And so then it's
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, what questions can I ask to better understand this? Then who else can I involve to better understand this? And then, as you mentioned, like you're all working towards this common goal, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
everyone is now united because of your motherly intuition of being persistent, not giving up, looking for additional information. And that's why it's so important too that there's like quality information and you take it with like a grain of sand, salt,
Yes.
whatever you want to say.
Yes.
Because it doesn't always work for you, but that kind of intuition and that motherly like sort of push will kind of help get you to that next step. And there's power
Yes.
in that. Like you are like the powerhouse for your child. So it's exciting.
Yes. It was. It was sort of bittersweet because I felt very validated to be like, oh, I know I wasn't making that up. But also then we were like, okay, and now let's take care of the necessary therapies that we need to take care of, So, yeah, it was sort of bittersweet in that validation, but I didn't give up and I just kept, and it didn't happen overnight. It may have happened over the course of several years, but we did it and it was great.
Yeah, it's not like how it's perceived on social media where you snap your fingers and then it's all good. As we mentioned already earlier in this, podcast, it's messy behind the scenes. Things are raw and emotional and
Hmm.
unpredictable. That is truly motherhood, parenthood, kind of is summed up in one sentence there. But,
Yeah, it is. It totally is.
what are some of the ways that you've avoided burnout and kind of, reducing that overwhelm as part of your journey?
Yeah. I speak a lot about content creator burnout, but I'm going to sort of take what I speak about there for motherhood because it's obviously applicable. One of, I'm just laughing because it's like, how many different things could we be burnt out on at the same time? I don't know. Um,
I feel that. I feel that in my heart and my soul, every bit of
yeah,
being.
yeah, yeah. It definitely has helped now that my son is older because he can be more independent on certain things. It's not that constant mommy, 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 mommy like it is when they're younger. I think one of the biggest things is, and it's so cliched, but I think it's important to remind everyone that you need to create your own village if you don't have a village. And even if you do have a village, you still need to create your own village. And sometimes that may be paying for a village in terms of a babysitter or a housekeeper or someone to pick up the kids from school while you're at work, whatever it happens to be. Create your village, ask for help, delegate. You cannot do everything alone. You cannot do everything for everyone all of the time. You just simply can't. I tried, and that's a guaranteed road to burnout. So when you have to just stop and say, what can I take off my load? How can I make this a little bit easier? Another thing, too, is not saying yes to everything. I had a time where I was saying yes to everything. I was the president of the PTA for 2 years, and that happened to be during the pandemic. So I was president of the PTA, and my son was home doing virtual school, and I was running my business, and I was doing other things. And it was just too much. And I've learned because, sometimes it takes me longer to learn than it should, but I've learned over time to stop saying yes to every single opportunity that doesn't either spark joy or fill your heart with happiness, right? Like I'm not going to say yes to everything all of the time now. And so I've learned that from experience and, to try to be better about not being such a people pleaser. But definitely create your village, whether it's paid or unpaid, however that happens to be. Find your people, find your friends. You need friends to rely on, to share stories with. There's like such an incredible power of a girls' weekend or a girls' trip where you could just all be together in your pajamas, sharing stories and hanging out. It's just, I like cannot emphasize that enough. Those are some of the things that have helped me. Um, and I grew up with a single mom. My parents divorced when I was very young, and my mom worked extraordinarily hard to support me. And I look back and I think, one, I don't even know how she worked as much as she did without just like straight up collapsing, but she did it and she's incredible. But two, I don't know how she didn't have burnout. I almost think that she like didn't even have time to think about the burnout. And so I often think especially in my content, I think a lot about people who don't have a partner, like how my mom didn't have a partner, but she did have my grandparents. So she leaned on them heavily to whether it was pick me up from school or take me somewhere or babysit or whatever. Everybody needs someone. Everybody. So try to find your someone who you can lean on and who you could trust.
Yeah. I know that we talked about social media too. And so then I'm thinking, listeners may be thinking, oh, well, I'm a part of Facebook groups. Like, this is fine. This is sufficient. I have my community online. Um, Talk a little bit more through like your village. Yes, there's probably a place for online, but I'm also wondering, like, as you mentioned with your mom too, like, you have to have physical people in your life that can give a little bit of relief or help take
Yeah.
some of it off. So, what is your journey
Yeah.
been like with that?
Yeah. Most of my friends are online. Most of my friends are my internet friends. It's been like that since my son was 3 years old, all the way through. There was a time when he was in elementary school when I had a lot of in-person friends because of the school. And that was really like the first and only time that that was the case. Now that he's in middle school and he's in a small micro school now, I don't have that same community anymore. Just because like I'm not really friends with the other moms. It's like everyone kind of keeps to themselves, which is fine. I lean on my internet friends so much for venting or chatting or, just telling stories or any of those things. And when he was young and I had my internet friends, that was more parenting related and parenting focused. Like, how do I get him to potty train? How do I get him to sleep? Now it's more like just like my venting about life kind of thing. Or like my friends and I are like in a different stage of life where we're not potty training kids and we're just like, how do you handle middle school? Like that kind of stuff. Um, but we make it a point to try to get together at least once a year to like physically see each other, to look each other in the eye, to like hug each other as we're listening to each other's stories. Um, but you do need in-person friends. You need somebody who is like an emergency contact if you couldn't be there and someone had to pick up your kid from school, any number of those things. And so I love my internet friends. I love, 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 love them. But at the end of the day, they wouldn't be able to pick up my kid from school if I needed them to, right? So you still need to create a community, and it doesn't have to be a whole community. It could just be one person. I have a friend, Kelly. She's like my one person. So you just need one person to be able to rely on. It doesn't have to be a whole group of people.
I love that. I love that because it is that good balance. And as someone who's built an online community, there is a ton of value in that and sharing your stories. And I love how you meet up in person and all of those kinds of nuggets of information on how you can move beyond the screen. I think too, bigger picture out the window, sort of perspective. But at the end of all of our episodes, we also ask our guests some questions that have been put into our platform. So at Launch Family, we've created a parenting guide called Emmy. So think of her as like your on-call support system for navigating modern family life. But moms can ask for anything from emotional challenges to school routines. And so before we go, I want to just ask one question because I think it's so on point with the community conversation that we've had. So one mom wrote in and she says, so how can I stay connected to other moms in real life if my social circle has changed since becoming a parent? So any tips on maybe taking that baby step out into your physical community? Where could you go to find other moms?
Yes. When my son was born, we were at the park all the time. So I was constantly at the park, constantly at the playgrounds, and we would meet new friends every day. But the problem was that would not always lead to a friendship. You might just have like a friend for that day and then you would like never see them again, right? And so that's a little challenging. That's hard. But I definitely recommend get out of your house, go to the library. The libraries are so invaluable. They often have like toddler story time. Go to the library, go to the park, go to the playground. There's so many free opportunities to like get out of your house and meet up with other parents. And the library is definitely one of them. I mean, each community may have a different thing, but I think like the library is like top tier. But that might be such a generic answer. I don't know. But for me, I'm just thinking about what we did is definitely was the playground, definitely was the park, definitely the library. And not just your library. We used to go to libraries in other towns, like the neighboring towns as well, so that you would sort of meet like a variety of different people.
I love that. I love this conversation, Tara. Thank you so much for your insights. your wisdom, the heart. I feel like we had a
I
very real
try.
conversation around motherhood and just like helping us navigate these decisions around our children today. If you loved today's conversation with Tara, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review and check out Tara's work at Modern Mom Probs as well. You know, she's created an incredible space for moms to find not just humor, but also that hope, community, real talk like we had today. Until next time, remember clarity, confidence, and connection are possible. You don't have to do motherhood alone, and there are many moms out here to help you navigate all of this alongside you.
Thank you so much, Jessica.
Thank you.